There is a moment in every woman's life when the ground beneath her feet seems to shift without warning. A moment when everything she has known, the familiar rhythms of morning, the sound of her family's voices, the smell of her mother's cooking, suddenly becomes a memory she must carry rather than a life she can return to. I know that moment well. I am Rebekah, daughter of Bethuel, granddaughter of Nahor. I was a young woman who once stood at a well at the end of a long day, unaware that the water I drew that evening would not only quench the thirst of a tired traveler, but would set in motion the endless course of my life. I did not know that the God of heaven had been moving long before I arrived at that well. I did not know that a prayer had been spoken on my behalf by a man I had never met, under a sky I had never seen. I did not know that the water jar resting on my shoulder was about to become the instrument of my destiny. But God knew. And that is the story I want to tell you today, not simply the story of how I became a wife and a mother, but the story of what it means to say yes to a God who sees you before you even know you are being watched. This is the story of a girl who ran toward a stranger and walked into her calling. This is my story, and perhaps, in some quiet corner of your heart, it is yours too. If you believe in the power of this story to touch the heart and transform thoughts, sign up now. Together, we can bring these teachings to those who haven't had the chance to hear them yet. My name is Rebekah, and I want to begin not with the extraordinary, but with the ordinary. Because that is where God so often begins. I grew up in Paddan Aram, in the household of my father Bethuel, in a land of dry winds and wide skies, and the smell of dust and cooking fires at the end of the day. I knew the rhythms of a woman's life in that place, the grinding of grain before dawn, the weaving by lamplight, the long walks to the well in the cooler hours of evening. The well was the center of our world in many ways. It was where women gathered, where water was drawn, where the news of the village traveled from mouth to mouth like a slow river. I loved the well. I loved the weight of the full jar on my shoulder, the resistance of it, the sense that I was carrying something essential and real. I loved the coolness of the water even on the hottest days. I was young then, full of energy, full of a quiet joy I did not yet have words for. People sometimes say I was beautiful, and I have never known quite how to hold that. Beauty is not something you feel from the inside, not really. From the inside, you feel the roughness of the clay jar. You feel the ache in your feet after a long walk. You feel the sweat on your neck in the summer heat. From the inside, you are just a girl doing the work that needs to be done. But I was also, and I say this not to boast, but because it matters to the story, a girl who had not been shaped by fear. My mother and father raised me in a home where kindness was expected, where guests were welcomed, where the stranger at the door was given bread before questions were asked. That is the soil I grew up in, and soil matters. The ground beneath a thing shapes what it becomes. I did not know that then, not in words. But I lived it every day in the way my mother's hands moved when she set a bowl before a visitor, in the way my father rose from his seat when someone appeared at the gate. Kindness was not a performance in our home. It was simply what you did. It was the air we breathed. So that is who I was when I walked down to the well on that particular evening. Just a girl with a jar on her shoulder. Just a girl who had done this 100 times before. The sun was low, and the light was golden, and the air smelled of warm earth and distant cook fires. I walked a familiar path, my sandals raising small puffs of dust with each step. I was not thinking about destiny. I was not thinking about God's plan or the future He had written for me. I was thinking, perhaps, about what we would eat that evening. Or about something my brother Laban had said that made me laugh. I was just a girl going to get water. And that, perhaps, is exactly the point. God does not wait for us to be ready before He sets His plans in motion. He does not wait for us to feel worthy or prepared or spiritually elevated. He meets us on the ordinary path with our ordinary jars, in the middle of our ordinary thoughts. He was already there at the well when I arrived. He had been there long before I came. I did not know that on this evening, everything was about to change. I did not hear the prayer that had already been spoken in the air above that well. But God heard it, and He was already arranging the moment I did not yet know was coming. I think about that sometimes, the way God works in the hours before we arrive. He is always already there. He is always already preparing the ground beneath our feet, even when we are walking toward it without knowing why. That evening, I walked to the well with my jar. I walked the way I always walked, steadily, without hurry, breathing in the cooling air of late afternoon. The shadows were long and golden across the ground. And at the well, there was a man I did not recognize. He was sitting near the stone edge of the well, and his camels, 10 of them, were standing in the dust nearby, tired from a long journey. A man who had come a very long way. A man who was tired and thirsty and who had been praying in the silence of his heart. I did not know any of this yet. All I knew was that there was a stranger at the well, and that in our household, a stranger was someone you helped. So I did what I had always been taught to do. I drew water. And everything began. What I did not know, what I could not have known as I approached the well that evening, was that a man named Eliezer had been traveling for weeks. He was a servant, the most trusted servant of a man named Abraham. Abraham was old now, full of years, full of the long weight of a life lived in conversation with God, and his heart was heavy with a single great concern. His son Isaac had no wife. Isaac was the child of the promise, the son born to Abraham and Sarah in their old age, the one through whom God had said the whole world would one day be blessed. And Isaac was alone. Abraham had made Eliezer swear a solemn oath, swear by the God of heaven and earth, that he would not take a wife for Isaac from among the daughters of Canaan, but would travel all the way back to the land of Abraham's family to find her. It was a great distance. It was a great responsibility. And Eliezer felt the weight of it with every mile. He was a practical man, a man who had spent his life solving problems, managing a household, making things work. But this was not a problem he could solve with cleverness alone. He needed God to be in this with him. And so he prayed. I imagine him stopping his camels near the well at the edge of the city, as the evening light stretched long across the ground. I imagine him bowing his head. He said, O Lord God of my master Abraham, please give me success today and show steadfast love to my master Abraham. He said it plainly. He said it directly. He did not perform his prayer. He simply spoke to God the way you speak to someone you trust completely. And then he named a sign. He said, let the young woman to whom I say, please let down your jar that I may drink, and who says, drink, and I will water your camels also, let her be the one you have appointed for your servant Isaac. He named a specific act. Not beauty. Not a family name. Not wealth or rank or any of the things the world uses to measure a woman's worth. He named kindness, generosity, the willingness to see a need and meet it before being asked. He prayed this prayer, and before he had even finished speaking, I came out with my jar on my shoulder. I have sat with it detail for a long time. Before he finished speaking, God was already answering before the last word of the prayer had left the man's lips. That is the kind of God we serve. He does not hear our prayers and then begin to consider them. He is already moving. He is already arranging. He is already walking the answer toward you before you have finished asking the question. Eliezer saw me coming down the path, and something happened in him. He rose and came toward me and asked, "Please give me a little water to drink from your jar." I said, "Drink, my lord." And I lowered the jar quickly to my hand and gave him a drink. And then I looked at the camels. They were standing there in the fading heat, dusty from the long road, their great dark eyes patient and tired. They needed water too. I did not think about it carefully. I did not weigh the effort against the inconvenience. Something in me simply said, "Of course." I said, "I will draw water for your camels also, until they have finished drinking," and I ran. That is the word the scripture uses. I ran back to the well and I drew water again and poured it into the trough. Do you know how much water 10 thirsty camels need after a long journey? A great deal. It is not a small thing what I did that evening. It was physical work, repeated work, the kind of effort that makes your arms burn and your back ache. I drew and poured and ran and drew again. And the man stood and watched me in silence, and later I would learn that he was watching not just with his eyes, but with his whole trembling heart. He was watching and wondering whether the Lord had made his journey successful. He was watching an ordinary girl do an ordinary act of kindness. And what he was seeing, though neither of us knew it yet, was the answer to a prayer. He was seeing me. Not the version of me I might have prepared if I had known I was being watched. Just me. Just a girl running back and forth to the well because 10 tired animals needed water. God chose me in that moment of running. Not in a moment of performing. Not in a moment of trying to be chosen. In a moment of simply being who I had always been. After the camels had drunk their fill, the man reached into his pack. He brought out a gold ring, a nose ring, heavy and beautiful, and 2 gold bracelets. He placed them in my hands, and my fingers closed around the cold, unfamiliar weight of the metal. The gold caught the last light of the evening and seemed almost to glow. I had never held anything like this before. He asked me whose daughter I was. He asked if there was room in my father's house for him to lodge for the night. My voice was steady when I answered, even though my heart was beginning to beat in a way it had not beaten before. "I am the daughter of Bethuel the son of Milcah, whom she bore to Nahor." I told him we had straw and feed for the camels, and plenty of room. And the man bowed his head. Right there, at the well, in front of me and the camels, and the last gold light of the evening, he bowed his head and blessed the Lord. He said, "Blessed be the Lord, the God of my master Abraham, who has not forsaken his steadfast love and faithfulness toward my master." He said, "As for me, the Lord has led me in the way to the house of my master's kinsman." I watched him pray and I felt something move through me like a breath of air from a direction I had not expected. Something like awe. Something like the edge of a very large thing I was not yet close enough to see clearly. I did not understand everything that was happening. But something in me knew, the way you know certain things before your mind catches up, that this moment was significant. I ran home. I ran to tell my mother what had happened, and the words poured out of me in a rush. When my brother Laban saw the ring and the bracelets and heard my breathless account of the man at the well, he ran out to meet him and brought him inside with great welcome. That night, Eliezer sat before us and told us everything. He told us about Abraham, the great man of faith, the friend of God, the one to whom all this wealth and blessing had come. He told us about Isaac, the promised son, the heir, the man who needed a wife. He told us about the oath he had sworn and the journey he had made. He told us about the prayer he had prayed at the well. He told us about the sign he had named. He told us about me. He looked at me as he spoke, and I sat very still and listened, and inside me something enormous was turning slowly. The way a river turns when it reaches a bend and finds itself suddenly facing a new direction. He finished and he asked us directly, "Now tell me whether you will deal kindly and truly with my master or not." My father and brother answered first. They said, "The thing has come from the Lord. We cannot speak to you bad or good. Behold, Rebekah is before you. Take her and go, and let her be the wife of your master's son, as the Lord has spoken." I sat and heard my name spoken in a sentence that was arranging my entire future. "Rebekah is before you. Take her and go." That night, I lay awake in the dark and thought about all of it. About the gold that had been placed in my hands, about the prayer that had been prayed before I arrived at the well, about the God who had apparently been looking in my direction from very far away. I was not afraid, exactly. But I felt the gravity of it, the realness of it. This was not a story. This was my life. The next morning, Eliezer was ready to leave. My mother and brother asked for a delay, just 10 days, they said, just 10 days to prepare, to say goodbye slowly, to let the leaving be gradual. But Eliezer said, "Do not delay me." And then the moment came. They called me and asked me directly, "Will you go with this man?" The room was quiet. Everyone was looking at me. And I had to hold the weight of the question by myself. A journey of weeks to a land I had never seen. A husband I had never met. A life I could not yet imagine. Everything familiar, my mother's hands, my brother's voice, the smell of our house in the morning, the path to the well I had walked 100 times, all of it becoming memory rather than present. I had to look at all of that and find my answer. And here is what I want you to understand. I was not fearless. I was not without grief for what I was leaving. But underneath the fear and underneath the grief, there was something else. Something quiet and certain and unmoving, like a stone beneath deep water. A sense that this was the direction God had been moving my whole life. That the kindness my parents had planted in me, the readiness to run when running was needed, the willingness to give more than was asked, all of it had been preparation. Not performance. Preparation. I had been shaped for this. And so I said the words, "I will go." 2 words. 2 of the most important words I have ever spoken. And I do not regret them, not for a single day. The journey was long. Longer than I had imagined, though perhaps nothing could have prepared me for the reality of it, the days stretching one after another like beads on a cord that seemed to have no end. I rode on a camel across ground I had never seen, under skies that slowly changed as we moved south and west toward a land that was becoming more mine with every passing mile. Though I had not yet arrived, my nurse Deborah rode beside me, faithful and steady as she had always been. But I will tell you plainly, there were hours when the road felt very long and the familiar felt very far away. There were mornings when I woke in the camp and lay still for a moment before remembering where I was and where I was going, and the remembering brought a small, sharp ache that I had to breathe through. I missed my mother's voice. I missed the specific way the light fell through the doorway of our house in the early morning. I missed the sound of the village, the rhythms I had grown up inside without even knowing I was inside them. Grief has a way of arriving in small pieces, not all at once. It comes in the smell of something familiar carried on an unfamiliar wind. It comes in a moment of laughter that you instinctively want to share with someone who is not there. It comes quietly, without drama, in the ordinary gaps of an ordinary day. I let myself feel it. I do not think feeling grief is the opposite of trusting God. I think it is part of being human, part of being honest. God does not ask us to pretend we are not losing something when we are. He asks us to trust Him in the losing. Those are different things. And learning to hold both at once, the grief and the trust, the ache of leaving and the faith in where you are going. That was the work of those long days on the road. There were also moments of wonder. The sky at night, so enormous and full of stars that it seemed impossible for a person to be truly lost underneath it. The way the land changed, the quality of the air, the color of the soil, the shape of the distant hills. The sense of moving through the world in a way I never had before, seeing it from the height of a camel's back, feeling the slowness of the journey settle something in me. I prayed during those days. Not always in words, sometimes just in the steady turning of my thoughts toward God, the way a plant turns toward the light without being asked. I thought about Eliezer's prayer at the well. He had named a specific quality of heart to generosity, the impulse to give more than was required, and God had answered him with me. God had looked at my ordinary, everyday kindness and said, "There, that one." I had not been doing anything extraordinary. I had been drawing water. I had been going back to the well one more time because the camels were thirsty. But God saw the heart behind the motion. God counted the running. God noticed the ordinary. And that thought, small and steady as a lamp flame on a still night, lit something in me that did not go out for the rest of the journey. Because if God could see me in my unremarkable everyday, if He could look at an ordinary evening at the village well and say, "That matters, that counts. That heart is the one I have been looking for," then nothing is wasted. Nothing is unseen. No cup of water given in kindness. No extra mile walked for someone who did not ask. No small yes spoken in a moment of uncertainty. None of it is lost. All of it is held. I rode through the long days carrying the truth like water in a clay jar. Careful with it. Grateful for it. And I was changing. I could feel it the way you feel the seasons change, not in a single moment, but in the slow accumulation of many moments, each one slightly different from the last. I was becoming someone who had said yes to the unknown and was living inside that yes. I was becoming someone who had left in faith and had not yet arrived but was still moving forward. And perhaps that is where many of us live most of our lives. Not in the moment of departure. Not yet in the moment of arrival. But in the long middle road, where faith is not a feeling but a direction. Where trust is not certainty but movement. Where hope is not the absence of doubt but the refusal to let doubt determine your steps. I kept moving, and the land kept changing around me. And somewhere ahead, though I could not yet see it, the evening field was waiting. It was evening when we arrived. The sky had gone from blue to gold to a deep, trembling amber, and the light was doing that thing it does near the end of a long day, softening everything, making the edges of the world gentle and warm. I was riding on my camel, tired from the journey but alert in a way that felt different from ordinary alertness. Something in the air felt different. Something in me felt still in a way I had not felt still in many days. I was looking out across the land, the fields, the hills in the distance, the tall grasses catching the last light, when I saw him, a man walking in the field. He was moving slowly, head slightly bowed, hands clasped before him, in the way of a person deep in thought, deep in prayer. There was something about the way he walked. Something unhurried and inward, something that spoke of a man who knew how to be alone with God. I did not know who he was. I asked Eliezer, "Who is that man walking in the field to meet us?" And Eliezer answered, "It is my master." My master. Isaac. The man I had traveled all this distance to meet. The man at the center of a story that had begun long before I was old enough to understand it. The son of the promise, the one God had set apart. The one I had been found for. I dismounted from my camel. My feet touched the ground and I covered my face with my veil, and for a moment I simply stood there in the evening field, breathing. There is no way to fully describe what that moment felt like. It was quiet. It was enormous. It was the kind of significant that doesn't announce itself loudly but settles over you like the evening itself, slowly, completely, changing the quality of everything it touches. We walked toward each other across the golden grass. Eliezer told Isaac everything that had happened, the prayer, the sign, the well, the water, the journey, all of it. And then Isaac brought me into his mother Sarah's tent. And the first became his wife. And the scripture says, in plain, unhurried words that I will carry with me always, it says that he loved me. He loved me. That word is not a small word in this story. It is not decoration. It is the point of everything. Because I had not been won through manipulation or arrangement, or the scheming of human hands trying to force a future into shape. I had been found by the hand of a God who answers prayer with kindness. I had been found because once, at the end of an ordinary evening, I ran back to a well for the sake of 10 thirsty camels and did not think twice about it. And God said, "That one. That heart. That is the one." I want to speak now not just about what happened to me, but about what I believe it means for you. For the woman listening to this who has been waiting for a long time. For the woman who has offered her small, faithful kindnesses and wondered if anyone has noticed. For the woman standing at the edge of her own yes, feeling its weight, not sure she has the courage to speak it. For the woman in the middle of her long road, tired, missing what she left behind, not yet in sight of where she is going. I want to say this to you slowly and clearly. God sees your ordinary. He is not waiting for you to become extraordinary before He acts. He is in the everyday, in the running, in the small repeated acts of faithfulness that you do without an audience. He is counting the water you draw for camels no one told you to water. He is watching the way your hands move when you help someone who cannot repay you. He is listening to the yes you speak quietly into the dark when no one else is in the room. The prayer over your life was spoken before you arrived at the well. God was already moving before you knew there was a story being written. Before you knew you were seen, you were already seen. Before you knew you were chosen, you were already being prepared. That is who He is. That is what He does. He meets us at the ordinary well. He chooses us in the running. He loves us in the arriving. And so I say to you what I wish someone had said to me on that long journey, in the middle of the miles, when the home I had left was far behind and the home I was going to was not yet in sight. Keep going. Keep being kind. Keep running back to the well. Keep drawing water for the camels, even when your arms are tired and no one has asked you to. Say yes when God calls you forward, even when you cannot see the whole road. Trust that the one who prepared your future is the same one who walks beside you through the dust. He is faithful. He was faithful to me at the well. He was faithful to me on the long road. He was faithful to me in the evening field, where a man I had never met walked through the tall grass to meet me and loved me. He will be faithful to you. Go to your well today with whatever jar you are carrying. Be generous. Go beyond what is asked of you. And trust that somewhere across a road you have not yet walked to the end, Something beautiful is already being arranged by a God who heard your prayer before you finished praying it. I am Rebekah. This has been my story. And it is, in some way that matters deeply, yours too. If you believe in the power of this story to touch the heart and transform thoughts, sign up now. Together, we can bring these teachings to those who haven't had the chance to